I want to talk to you about is the importance of business succession planning. Succession planning is what you do, talking about how do you prepare to hand over control of your business. Where's your business going to go when you retire? And as a small business person, and I'm a small business person as well, you know, a lot of times we work so hard in our business and doing what we do that we kind of tend to push those things, other things aside. And business succession planning is one of those that probably gets put at the very bottom of the list. I spend a significant amount of my time working with businesses in various forms, either doing audits for them or tax work or tax planning. But almost every time that I go to a business owner and say, you know, what are we going to do with this when you retire? The number one answer I get is they're going to take me out of here in a pine box. And so, you know, that's all fine and well, but what's going to happen to this business that you built when they take you out of here in the pine box? And if you don't have some type of plan in place, the options for that are not very good. The key to all of it is putting together a plan way before you need that plan to kick into action. You know, in an ideal world, you're going to work till you're 50, 60, 70, whatever that age is, and you're going to either sell that business or hand it off to your kids, or some of your key employees are going to take over. But what happens in the event of an untimely death? We call it at our office getting hit by the speeding passenger train. You know, it's an unexpected event that happens. What happens to that business then? And if you don't have a succession plan in place, worst case scenario is that it goes into probate, and you have a judge that's making decisions about what happens to your business. So you want to try to make sure that those the succession plan gets put into place, and that it's in writing, it's been conveyed, it's recorded, so that in the event of your untimely death, then there's some things that happen to trigger that succession plan. Basically, you have 4 steps. Understanding that you need a plan, and that's the biggest one that I deal with, is that I got a lot of guys that tell me, and ladies too, that own businesses, yeah, I need a plan, never get around to doing it. And you know, during the BP oil spill, there were a lot of businesses on the Gulf Coast that basically lived and worked year to year. You know, they would make money, spend all that money, and then start all over again. Unfortunately, some of those folks didn't exactly record all the money that they made and all the money that they spent. And so there was a big valuation problem there. A lot of people didn't get paid damages that they legitimately lost because they weren't actually recording all their sales and all their expenses. They were cheating the system. So part of that is to be able to get the value out of your company. You know, you can't be taking the cash out of the business and not reporting that. I mean, that's a huge issue, because, you know, if you have a business that's making $1 million a year, but you're doing, you know, half of that in cash, when you go to sell that business, you have no way to prove that. The bank's not going to loan money on that. I mean, there's just a lot of problems, not to mention the fact that you can end up with IRS in your retirement years unplanned. So you've got to understand, you need the plan, you need to make sure that you're doing everything properly in your business so that you can get the most value for that. Then you need to decide how you're going to do that, come up with a value for the business, and then figure out how that's going to be financed. And that's what Bruce is going to tell you about is one very good option for that. Challenge today in small businesses, and I see this regularly, is that people don't go to work for a company and stay there until they retire anymore. People, you know, they change careers 5 or 6 times, or at least change businesses. So the challenge is to develop a talent pool that's going to stay with you, to actually be there to potentially buy your business or take over running that business from you. And to me, and I think in most businesses, that's the best option. Obviously, I guess the best option is if you have children that you can hand that business off to, but I can tell you right now, my daughter's not going to come be a CPA. she's already gone through her college career. She's going to be a speech therapist, so that's not an option that I have. So my option is develop other CPAs that are going to stay with me long enough to become partners with me. And I'm building that pipeline. I'm building my succession for people to come in and buy that business from me. And part of that is, not all people are cut out for that. I've got a lady that was working there before I went to work. She's never wanted to get her CPA, not interested in becoming part of management. And you need a certain amount of those people working in your business. But the other side of it is you also need to develop that leadership in there. And so we try to concentrate our resources on those people that are going to be there in the long haul and have the potential for being able to purchase that business. These are some statistics from, I think we did, when I first put this together, this was in 2008, and I'm fairly certain these statistics are pretty close to the same. If it's a family-owned business, most of the time they want that business to stay in the family. Now, there are occasions where family members have no interest in working in the business. And so they're looking for that person that they can groom to take over the business. 70% of the generation family members share that hope that they want to keep going with that business. And I think Bruce has some statistics in that of what that failure rate is of transferring that wealth from generation to generation. It's kind of disheartening when you start looking at that. This just kind of talks about how businesses are owned. And I think if and especially in our area, if you start looking around at the businesses in this area, a significant portion of those are small family-owned businesses. Some of them are bigger family-owned businesses, but when you start looking around and taking stock in the businesses in our area, there's a overwhelming majority of those that are family-owned. And so that's a challenge in the business world, is how do you get that wealth transferred, the business transferred, and if you want to keep it in the family, how do you keep it in the family? But if you don't have a family to keep it in, then how do you develop that plan to move that business onto someone else? I face that on a regular basis with business clients. Is they get to their 60s and start looking around and say, hey, I want to sell the business. And when you start talking to them about what that business is worth, in their mind what it's worth and what the market will pay for that business are usually miles apart. They think they have a $5 million business when in reality it's barely $1 million business. So understanding that, coming up with a good, well-defined succession plan, understand that if you're dealing with a family, and I see this quite often, that succession plan can create tension between those family members until you get that down in writing and get everybody on the same page. And even then, sometimes it causes tension. I know some instances where the actual succession of the business has caused the family to basically explode. They don't talk to each other anymore. And I know some where now you've got family members suing each other over the succession of the business. And that's all due to the fact that the patriarch of the family that started the business just didn't have that business plan in place and how that transition was going to take place. Addressing who's going to run the business, and this is a huge issue. I'm dealing with a family-owned business that had multiple companies in multiple states, that there was a succession plan in place. The father of the family, and the father had 3 daughters. He put in place one of the daughter's husbands as the head of the company that ran all of the companies. After he died, the fighting started because one sister thought her husband was more qualified to run the businesses, and things began to unravel until today. None of the sisters are together in business anymore. They bought one of the original husband that was running the company. They bought her and him out of all of the other businesses, And then the other two that were still in business together have now separated, so I don't think there's going to be Thanksgiving supper at their house altogether now. But it's, you know, the other side of it is that if you are a family-owned business and your wife is still alive, and I'm going to be sexist since we're all guys in here, but if you die, you want to still make sure that you have an opportunity for your wife to have some income or have their ownership interest protected. So that's another reason to have that. And then the potential tax consequences of not having a succession plan in place can be disastrous. You know, I think as a business owner, we all want to see our businesses survive past us. I don't know of anybody that's gone into business that says, yeah, I'm going to do this until I decide to quit and then I'm shutting it down. You want to move that business along to somebody else, whether it's a family member or heirs or whoever, or to an outside party. I mean, that's, you know, kind of what you go into business for. It's kind of a retirement plan. Or if, like in my case, I couldn't stand the thought of working for a big corporation and having people that were totally disconnected to what I was doing, making decisions that affected me on a daily basis. That's kind of how I got into business for myself. But you want to make sure that that business survives, and part of the key of that is understanding what drives the value of that. Well, like I talked about earlier, you know, death, disability, retirement, that's part of what drives changing the business. Bankruptcy, divorce, early withdrawal of an owner. You know, the divorce I have seen cause problems in companies before, where you have two unrelated parties in a business. They had a well-thriving business until one of them got divorced, and they did not address in their business operating agreement how they were going to deal with that. And so it basically blew the company up. And so that's another avenue to think about is, and what I generally tell people is if I'm working with them in the beginning when they're starting a business, basically what you have to understand is when you're going into business, everything is great. Everybody wants, you know, the best, the world's rosy, but at some point in time, things are going to turn bad, whether it's a downturn in the economy, sales tank, whatever. You have to address the bad parts of the business when you go into business, because if you don't, you're just making a recipe for disaster. You have to talk about how you get out of business, what happens if you have to put money into business, who's responsible, how much, you know, all of those things, and that needs to be addressed while everybody's still happy with each other. Because if you don't address that and things do go bad, then it really gets bad. That's where you get attorneys involved and life becomes miserable for everybody. So there's basically three types of plans. And one is a family transfer. The other is transferring the business to management or selling to an outside party. And that's kind of, I'm going to go through this very quickly and then turn it over to Bruce to kind of give you some of the how-tos. But you basically got to lay down how you're going to get there. What are you going to do to transfer? Who's going to be running the business? You obviously want to maximize the value of the business so that the families that potentially could be taking over want to be there. I mean, you know, if you have a business that's not profitable, that's always struggling, you know, nobody wants to take over a business like that. So the better the business is functioning and more profitable it is, the easier it is to put successors into place. Obviously, you want to be able to continue to serve clients. I've seen some businesses that did have a succession plan in place, but because it wasn't executed very well, the majority of their client base left before they could actually implement the succession plan. So you have to make sure that you have the proper people in place to make sure that your clients still get serviced. And you want to be able to provide reasonable and secure retirement for the retiring owners and avoid the crisis situation, because that's basically what happened in the business I'm referring to, is that the owner died, nobody was driving the ship basically. The successor or the family members came in, tried to execute the succession plan, and during the process of that, the majority of the clients left because there was that uncertainty. Nobody communicated to the clients. They didn't know what was going to happen, so they just found somebody else to do their business for them. So kind of what you want to do is identify your key steps, lay out a plan, lay out a timeline, who's going to be involved in that. You know, if you're going to do an ESOP, you want to already be talking to Bruce, or if you are relying on insurance, lawyers, your CPA. I mean, there's lots of people that need to be involved in that, but you need to identify who the key people are and who's going to be executing the plan, and then discuss it and come up. I mean, none of these plans are going to probably be perfect, but you can think out a lot of the potential pitfalls ahead of time if you talk through them. Kind of the questions to ask is to whom should the business be transferred, when should it be transferred, and how can the business be transferred? And that's really just the beginning parts of the process. So, you know, some succession plans today, because they don't exist, the succession plan is the owner dies, the doors close, and everything's over with. That's probably, I'd hate to see what the statistic on that is today, but I know I personally deal with in my CPA practice way too many businesses that's basically what the succession plan is today, because they don't have anything in place for them to pass that business along or to try to sell it. The other option is to groom somebody from within the firm, one of your employees, to be able to buy that out. What we have in place, I have a partner, so that's kind of the succession plan, and other employees that are going to be partners that will buy out the business. But in the event that something happens to both partners at this point in time, we have an informal agreement with another business that would take over our business and make sure that it stayed in place while the succession plan kicked in. You can also merge or with another practice, or in our case with another practice, or enter into a practice continuity agreement. And that's basically what we have as a practice continuity agreement with another firm. Not too many opportunities for that to happen, although my partner and I do travel together sometimes to continuing ed or something like that. You know, nobody likes to think about that, but in the event something happens to both of us at the same time, you kind of need to figure that out. The timing of the succession plan can happen in two ways: in crisis mode, untimely death, that type of thing, or in proactive mode, where you're doing the things ahead of time and laying everything out in an orderly fashion so that can happen before your death or before your retirement, whatever the event may be. Some of the ways you can move your business along is gifting. You can, as a business owner, currently for 2015, you can gift up to $14,000 to an individual. If you and your wife own the business together, you can both gift $14,000. So if you're going to be moving your business to one of your children, you can do $28,000 a year, and the recipient does not pay taxes, and neither does the donor. So that's one option. Trust is another option. That there are more trusts than I can start to name, more structures that you can do those, but basically you can put the business into a trust and then pass that along is another option. You can have a buy-sell agreement with another business that's in a similar or the same type of business that you are. Life insurance, and thankfully there are a lot of people that do deal with life insurance. The challenge I have, and I'm talking to a company right now that's pretty much in startup stage, and he sent me a proposal the other day for 3 different options on life insurance policies, all of which had very high payouts, but also had very high premiums. And I was like, okay, yes, this is a good idea, but with where you're at right now and the type of revenue you're bringing in, you're paying out a disproportionate amount in insurance. And what exactly are you accomplishing with all this insurance? You know, I understand you want to take care of employees and have something there for your wife, but you have the potential for going broke paying the insurance premiums while you're doing that. So insurance has a place. It could be part of the plan. So, you know, it's certainly an item to be considered. So how do you make sure that you have that continuity? Is putting together the plan, making sure you can implement the plan, reviewing it, because it's not going to be a static document. You're not going to come up with this plan, you know, today and expect it to happen 20 years later the way that you wrote it today. So you need to review it, make modifications as needed. You need to let the people know that are going to succeed you that when that retirement is going to happen. I've dealt with some businesses that didn't have a plan in place. Owner comes in one day and says, I'm retiring. I need to sell the business, you know, and it was total chaos for about half a year until we could figure out how to make all these things happen. And it came out mostly okay, but there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of resentment, because the succession could have happened much smoother had it been dealt with, you know, before the day the guy walks in and says, I want to sell. Making sure that you set the retirement payments so that it doesn't kill the people buying the business. I've seen some departing owners strangle the business basically because the amount that they were paying out was so high that it killed their opportunity for growth because all the cash flow was going to pay out the retiring partner. And as they survived it, they could have survived it a lot better had it been structured a little bit better for the people that were buying the business. Basically what you want to do is make sure that you create a win-win situation for the person retiring and the person that's continuing the business. Kind of in the first year, you want to start coming up with a plan, come up with who your successor is going to be, and that can be, I mean, kind of limitless on who that can be. You know, family members, management, outside parties. If you have a successor that you can start grooming along in the business, you want to start introducing them to clients. In our business, that's a very big part of what we do because, you know, basically when somebody becomes a client of a CPA, they're kind of there forever, and they deal with the firm because of the person that's taking care of them. So when that person's looking at leaving or retiring, getting that person introduced to someone new, somebody else that's taken over their taxes and all of that, then it's personal. So you want to make sure that you get those people introduced to those clients and get a date set and then follow that date and make sure that those responsibilities get transferred in an orderly fashion so that the client's needs continue to get met. Kind of in year two, you know, you want to make sure that the briefing on the successor and make sure that all the clients are being taken care of, all the backgrounds there. You know, one of the issues that we have in our business is you work with a client for so long, there's things that are kind of, you know about because you've dealt with them for so long that may not necessarily be in writing, and that transfer of knowledge needs to happen. That's a big thing. The successor needs to start handling those day-to-day communications. They don't need to be calling the guy that's retiring and running stuff through them anymore. And talk to the client and find out about, you know, how is the person that's taking over doing? Are they going to be able to meet your needs? And try to address those things with the successor so that they don't become problems and the clientele leave. Obviously, if they leave, then they have a harder time paying for the business. The retiring owner in year three kind of starts to assume a supervisory role and making sure that that successor is taking care of all the relationships. You know, throw them a party, send them out and tell them to have a good life. That's kind of where you want to go. Because we're short on time, I'm going to let Bruce kind of take over at this point and start talking to you about how to fund that with an ESOP. But if nothing else, if you don't kind of get anything from what I went through this with you, is that you need to address a business succession plan today if you don't already have one, and make sure that if you have one, that somebody else knows about it. I mean, I've talked to people who said, oh yeah, I have all this stuff, and it's all in their head and nobody else knew about it. So please, please, please talk to your CPA, your attorney, whoever's involved with you in your business, and make sure that you get that plan and get it moving forward.